Questioning the past and you're wondering why. Time to check out History High.
What connects spies, walls and great value chicken? Well, of course it's the Berlin Wall. Welcome to History High. Sadly, we still live in a world where politicians feel the need to build walls. Of course, this is not a new phenomenon. From Hadrian's Wall, the Great Wall of China, to more modern walls, the apartheid wall in Israel today, and Donald Trump's wannabe wall between Mexico. Walls have long been used to keep people in or keep people out. This video is aimed at GCSE students and looks at one of the most famous walls of all time, the Berlin Wall, which stood for almost 30 years as a symbol of the division between the capitalist West and the communist East. To do well in any history exam, you should make sure you know the causes, features and consequences of the major events that you're studying. At the end of this video, look at these keywords again and check you can explain them all. There are three main causes that led to the Berlin Wall being built: the location of Berlin, the refugee crisis, and failed summits. When it comes to the location of Berlin itself, following the Second World War, Germany and its capital Berlin had been split into 4 zones belonging to America, Britain, France and the USSR. After the Berlin blockade in 1948-49, America, France and Britain had joined up their zones to form what became known as West Germany, while the USSR's zone became known as East Germany. Now, look at the map of Germany. Can you spot a problem with dividing Berlin into 4 zones? Yep, you guessed it. Berlin is actually in the Soviet zone. So why is that a problem? Well, as America put huge amounts of money into West Berlin, introduced a new currency and consumer goods, the Soviet Union couldn't afford to do this, and frankly didn't want to. Instead, they wanted to punish Germany after World War II. As West Berlin got richer, East Berliners started to become jealous of life in the capitalist West, and communism started to look really bad. This led to the second cause of the Berlin Wall, the refugee crisis. Before 1949 and 1961, 2.7 million East Germans escaped to West Germany. Many of these refugees were highly skilled, and so this led to what was known as a brain drain. Berlin was one of the main places the refugees could escape to the West. The final cause of the Berlin Wall was a series of failed summits and what was known as the U2 incident. A summit is just a posh politician's way of saying a meeting. These summits are going to appear on the screen with details. You should pause the video and jot down these details. But just before you do, big shout out to my Year 11s last year who came up with this great way of remembering these 4 meetings. As the meetings were in 4 different places: Geneva, David, Paris and Vienna. To help you remember the first letters of each of those places, you can use the mnemonic Great Chicken, Peng Value. Now, pause the video and jot down the details. See, in the final 2 summits, the U2 incident massively increased tensions. Chicken is not the only meat to be mentioned today. The U2 incident also led to major beef between Khrushchev and Eisenhower, who was replaced by President JFK in 1961. After Khrushchev's final ultimatum, JFK started to prepare for war and spent $207 million on nuclear shelters. Luckily for JFK, however, Khrushchev also didn't want war, and so instead, on the night of the 12th of August 1961, East German troops secretly set up a barbed wire fence around the whole of West Berlin. In the coming months, the fence was reinforced and eventually became a 96-mile-long, heavily guarded wall. On the 18th of October, Soviet tanks blocked Western access to the east, causing a standoff with American tanks. After 18 hours, the American tanks pulled back. The crisis was over. President JFK commented, "It's not a very nice solution, but a wall is a hell of a lot better than a war." Finally, what were the consequences of the Berlin Wall? You can remember these as RAD, R-A-D. The first major consequence was that by stopping East Germans escaping to the west, it ended the refugee crisis. For the 30 years the wall stood, it's estimated only 5,000 people escaped East Berlin, and of those, over 200 were shot dead while trying to escape. You can see on the screen Peter Fechter, who famously jumped from a window into the death strip between the walls, where he was shot and lay screaming for an hour as he bled to death. The second consequence was that it allowed Khrushchev and JFK to avoid war, while also appearing strong. In 1963, JFK visited West Berlin and spoke to massive crowds, giving his Ich bin ein Berliner, where he offered solidarity to those living in Berlin. Finally, the wall became a powerful symbol of the division between East and West, with America able to portray it as evidence that Eastern citizens had to be forced to live under communism. This was a propaganda victory for America. The war lasted nearly 30 years, until huge protests in November 1989 eventually brought it down. So, in summary, 3 causes: refugee crisis, location, and summits. To remember the 4 summits, remember Great Chicken, Peng value. And for the consequences, remember RAD, RAD. Refugee crisis was ended, the USA and USSR avoided war, and the war became a symbol of the division of the world into communism and capitalism. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and check out our other Cold War video on the Cuban Missile Crisis. Thanks for listening, and remember, learn the past, change the future.
So if you're questioning the past and you're wondering why, time to check out history.